Hi there, everybody, and welcome to another session of Global Radio TV. Today I have some interesting tips for you from a very fascinating gentleman that I met. His name is Robert Kirby. He has the Kirby Leadership Academy. Yesterday he spoke for about an hour and a half at the in Sawgrass at the hotel, the Sawgrass Grand Hotel. They hosted it, and it was with the Global Trade Chamber. And since we're such an international community here, I figured I'd share some of the golden nuggets. They had their yearly annual Asian networking event, and he's worked in Asia for almost 20 years. He's got a lot of corporate clients, and I thought there was a lot of wisdom in what he said, so I would share a few things that I learned. Let's see, 3 things that I remembered were, number 1, back in '89, up until that time, you couldn't find any books on leadership. You could find books on management, but he was purporting that you need to be a leader and serve in your community. You need to influence and be able to lead yourself, and obviously to contribute back to society. I really loved those points. And he's someone from England. He had worked with the Intercontinental Hotel Group for 25 years. He was a general manager before he left to start his own business, doing speaking and consulting and training with different corporations. So he's been all over Asia, many different large companies, and he had actually gave some interesting examples. Let's say 3 pieces of advice I would say is that you can become better than you are today. Your potential is actually higher if you want to improve your career, your finances, your relationships. It's all sort of a pie. It all needs to be balanced, like a spoke of a tire or of a wheel. And he said you're probably the sum of the 5 people you drink coffee with or take coffee with. So if you're around sort of negative people who are expressing themselves that way, you need to be very cognizant, because 80% of our thoughts are probably coming from a lot of unconscious thoughts. And so something else I think people had said that was interesting was that communication is very important. He gave an example. We did an exercise amongst the group. He said there was a CEO. He said to his middle-aged secretary that he just won a large amount of money in the lottery and would be back because he was leaving. So when he asked the audience, everybody had a different interpretation. There was no right or wrong answer. So the middle-aged secretary went from 35 to 65 in terms of age. How much he won in the lottery went from 1 million to about 650 million. So depending on your perception and what your background was and your filters, there was a very different type of understanding and communication. And as well, when he would return was also interpreted quite differently from the crowd. Some people thought he'd be back in an hour. One said he'd be back for lunch. Another said he'd never come back. So if you can imagine how important it is when you're with your clients to have that communication. If they're telling you this is too expensive and you don't know what their parameters of expensive is, that's an extra hurdle. So it's always good to be cognizant that everyone's thinking possibly about different things or may interpret things differently. Like he was giving the example of him and his wife. His wife is also from Asia, and his children. I am in front of the bank, his wife said. So then he said, I don't see her, so where are you? So it turns out that for her, the bank meant something from college of another bank, and for him it meant the corporate banking account that they had. So there's always ways that we can enhance our communication. And certainly he gave examples for, how it's very important in many situations. It could even be life-threatening if our communication skills are not up to par. One or two of the corporate examples he gave was, for instance, Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks. He knew how to listen. One of his baristas had come up with the Frappuccino years ago, and within 12 months, that recipe, that Frappuccino, actually made them an extra $50 million for Starbucks. So it's good that he was willing to listen to someone that was just a barista, who mentioned it to his manager, who then took it up the ladder to Howard Schultz. And so that's an example of how you always need to be a very good listener if you're in a leadership position. He also mentioned the example of Kodak, that Kodak was actually the first company to develop the digital camera, and somehow it just got nixed through. Everybody said we're a paper and chemical company, where they weren't interested in digital. So even though they did the research and development, it just got cut out, nixed. It was ignored. And then in 2011, Facebook bought Instagram. Instagram had 13 employees at the time. It was very tiny, barely on the map. But it really changed the way over that last decade how digital had influenced so much. I think the Japanese had also, in that interim, taken over very strongly with all their digital cameras as well. So Kodak, being a giant with 300,000 employees, somehow got relegated to being in bankruptcy and disappeared, basically. So there's a lot of examples of large companies such as Nokia, he said, or BlackBerry, that have risen quickly but then also fallen if they're not very observant. So you need to be observant. That was one of his other tips. And he said the third tip, he mentioned Richard Branson, who always made mistakes. So in his book, The Dancing Dragon and Headless Chicken, you need to always fall forward, make mistakes. Every mistake will take you closer to success. And look how beautiful this is, the whole sort of visual image of being a dancing dragon as opposed to a headless chicken when you're just not being effective. So he always talks about health as well. It's very important to maintain yourself with 3 liters of water and to exercise at least 3 times a week. I know where he's living in Asia, sometimes he mentioned China, the air quality may not be as good. So it's just important to keep, as he said, the firewall, like a computer. You have to protect it from what it's hearing from the media or negative things from other people. So keep your health strong, keep your mind strong, and just have all those wonderful global alliances like he was talking about. So thank you all very much, and we'll look forward to another recap of another book.